And then Zach was making like some fucked up potions, basically. Like it was like like fresh garlic, just like blended up with like boiling water. And then I don't even know if he put honey in it. And he was like, just drink this. And I was like, I'm good. I'm straight on that.
Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. This is another episode of the Scoped Exposure podcast. Very excited for this one today. Someone that I've, once I started this whole podcast journey, I think I always have like a mental list of people that I eventually want to hit up to come on the show. And I think a lot of things recently with new Year of the Knife music coming out, as well as the switch up of the lineup, there's a lot of interesting things. But even in addition to all the music stuff, I think this guest has a lot of cool creative things going on. And I think as another creative who's trying to scale and do, taking this thing to the next level and trying to think about my ventures in more of a business sense, I'm selfishly very excited for this. So without further ado, Madi Watkins of Year of the Fucking Knife on the fucking podcast. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. That was an epic introduction. Thank you.
Epic introduction. Well,
Yeah.
that's I'm glad that I hit the epic standard for that.
For sure.
So Madi, if people haven't been living under a rock, I'm sure people have heard, the new EP Dust to Dust that you guys have just put out, which is very, very exciting. I think it's been a long time since new Year of the Knife music has been on people's radars and pounding through people's ears. But before we get into all the music chats, we obviously have to check some bevs. And I'm
Yes.
I have a gut feeling that you've brought something very special to the show.
It's honestly, it's special in the sense that like I need to wake up and
Okay.
be ready to talk. But I got iced chai.
Oh.
I live in a place that does not have like a sick ass coffee spot nearby. Like I have to drive like half an hour to an hour to go to a cool shop. So
Gotcha.
Starbucks today.
Okay.
But yeah, it was either that or I had like a tea from Salem from when we were up there recording, and I was like, maybe I'll make that. Ran out of time. Starbucks.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, that's good. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm like, if it's not black coffee, the second drink of choice is a chai. Normally a dirty chai. I don't know if you fuck with the dirty chai yourself.
I do. I did not today because if you ask like anyone that knows me, I love coffee, but then I get like kind of jittery. So I was like, dirty chai was not the move today. Chai is enough energy for me right now.
Yeah. There's definitely certain people with different caffeine tolerances where it's like they'll have one thing and they're like I've had people come on where they drank a Bang energy drink for the first time and they felt like they were gonna die. So
dude, no, okay, so it's so weird. Like a few FYAs ago, everybody was like, Bang's so sick, and I was like, I'm so fucking tired. Like we drove like straight through to get there or whatever and like played, and I was like, yeah, like I'm pretty sensitive to energy drinks, so I'll drink like half of it. And I was like, I feel like my skin is crawling off. Then opposite end of the spectrum, like Brandon, I don't know, Brandon that plays guitar in the band's my husband. He can drink a Red Bull and fall asleep like immediately.
That's so strange.
I don't get it. Like I'm just like, there's something wrong.
Yeah, my grandpa, who like when I was growing up would drink like 6 cups of coffee a day. Like it was like his, like he had a regimen and a schedule when it came to before he retired. But it was like he would drink black coffee at like 9 p.m. and like go to bed at 10, and it's totally fine.
It's like water.
Yes,
They're
exactly.
Like, no, it's fine.
That's always his excuse. It's like, it's pretty much just water. It's like, well,
that was their hydration.
Exactly.
That was their hydration for the day.
So, Bevs wise for me, anyone that's an avid follower and tuning into multiple episodes of the show knows I'm a huge Liquid Death head. Got tons of it
Yeah.
behind me here and in my house. So there's been an element where it's like it's been the easy Bev to check, but I wanted, because I've been looking forward to this interview for so long, I wanted to have something that I've never checked here on the show before to
Ooh.
do. So, and I'm not like crazy about these bevs specifically, but who knows? This could be the one that kind of pushes me to explore a little bit more. So I'm going to be drinking a Cove. So it's like a
Ooh.
gut healthy soda. So it's got like all the
Oh.
probiotic kind of shit in it. And I
Like
have,
the poppy.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
similar to
yeah.
that. Orange is also my favorite color. So I definitely wanted to try that flavor first. But I don't know. The probiotic side is always like, is it kombucha? Is it a bev? Like, it's
Yeah.
kind of
No,
confusing,
it's
at least for
good.
me.
Some of those, like, the poppy ones are some of them are really good, and then some of them I'm like, "I can taste the health in this in a
Right,
bad way."
right, right.
In a bad way.
Yeah, there's a little bit too much greens and not
Yeah.
it is a balancing act. Um,
Yeah.
well, Maddie,
What's the
cheers.
review?
Oh, well, yeah. First off, I apologize. I was only taking a sip because the fizziness was like
Oh,
going
bubbling over.
above the lid, and I had a fear that
Mm.
I was going to check you and then have probiotic soda
Like,
all over my laptop. So, but it's good so far. But I'll do a official swig. But cheers to
official.
you, Maddie. Really excited to
Cheers.
do this. That was full.
Bubbly.
Yeah,
Bubbly.
that's
What's
good.
the
It's
verdict?
like it tastes like a healthier version of like an orange soda. Like,
Not
but
bad.
not like it's got no sugar in it. So like that's a good sign as well, that it tastes that sweet without it being like just like
Filled
sugar
with
cube on
sugar.
sugar cube. So
Yeah. I'll have to try it.
yeah. How about your bev? What's your, same old, or
It's a Starbucks iced chai with oat milk. It's doing the job.
it's doing the job. That's what I love to hear. So Maddie, you, like we were talking about before we were recording, you've listened to a couple of these, so you kind of know the flow. But any new guests that I have on the show, I always like to get a, we don't need to do your entire hardcore origin story if you don't want to, but just wanting to get a couple contextual pieces as far as what put you on the path to discovering music.
Yeah. Trying to think. So I went to an art school for middle school and high school in Wilmington, Delaware. And my mom was, I'm trying to think like the exact point, but my mom, like in college, she was like a DJ and she like was more into like punk and like Brit rock. So I grew up listening to some of that with her. And like funny enough, like I found out years later, my mom like interviewed the Cro-Mags like when they came through like Westchester.
What?
And like yeah, like
Crazy.
I was like just like weird shit. Cause she was like, yeah, I was never really like super into hardcore. Like I liked like more punk shit.
Mm.
But yeah, just from like hearing things with her and then because I went to an art school, everybody was like really creative, really like open and like communicative, but I feel like most people liked like pop and show tunes the most. So when I found other people that liked heavy music, that's where I started like sort of branching out. Like a girl on my bus like really liked I think it was like System of a Down and like Slipknot and stuff. And then like
Mhm.
we would like trade albums that we had downloaded from like Pirate Bay and just be like, "Oh, you should listen to this." Like and I used to love like Pirate Bay used to do not necessarily like comps, but it was like people would make playlists of their favorite shit and kind of like unofficially upload
Oh,
it as a comp.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So like I
that's like prior, this is well before streaming is at the scale
yeah,
that it is now. But that's very cool to be able to like download
yeah.
something and you get a bunch of different tracks. I'm sure someone's
Yeah.
probably trying to sneak the Rick Astley like Rick Roll song like somewhere in the
Oh,
middle there.
that happened many times where I would get on the bus because I wouldn't know until I was like listening on my iPod and I'd be like, awesome. But every single song. But yeah, like I think just like finding music from that. And then there's a venue like pretty much like the historic venue in Delaware is called the Grange.
Mhm.
And like I lived in Wilmington, but it wasn't like in the city. It's like suburb Wilmington, just like Wilmington by area code. Uh yeah, and it was like literally a mile and a half from my house. So they had shows there like every weekend, sometimes 2 to 3 times a weekend. And yeah, I spent a lot of time there, like starting in like 6th grade. I would just go no matter like what the show was, I would just like beg my mom to go or like try to find chores like in the neighborhood to like get show money to go.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I went to like literally everything. It was like metal shows, deathcore shows, hardcore shows, metalcore shows, anything they had.
Mhm.
And
It's funny that you mentioned how there's like yeah, because normally there's maybe one other person or like a couple other people within your high school or whatever that are like showing you or like you're getting to trade things. But yeah,
yeah,
but the majority of people are like, I listened to fucking like 303 or whatever it was at the time.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
it's like, bro, I need some fucking breakdowns. Like
yeah. Well, that's what was crazy. It was like I feel like a lot of times art kids feel like the outcasts in their school, but
Mhm.
like there weren't. Everybody was a fucking nerd and everybody was like a cool artist like at the school I went to. So there was no shame in it. It was just hard finding somebody that was like, no, like I love heavy music. Other
Right.
people were like, I don't know, like why are they screaming? They're probably breaking their voice doing that, like that sort of thing.
Well, that's interesting because it's like if the school that you're going to is art focused, if anything, there's like more opinions because like if you're looking at like heavy music as a whole, like there's all these different niches to it. So if there's
Yeah.
someone who's like into music, but they're into this very weird like electronic EDM, and then anything that doesn't
Right.
have like that side of it or it has screaming, it's like it's almost like extra critical versus like a jock
Yeah.
dude who's like, "This is dumb," you know?
Right. Or like, I could probably work out to this, but I wouldn't listen to it. Like that sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah.
That sort of vibe.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so talk to me about like kind of the transition point when you were like, you're going to all these shows and it sounds like you're in this pursuit of like, I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to, find, I'm going to mow grass. I'm going to figure out whatever I need to do within, the chores that I have at the age that I am to go to these hardcore shows. Um, when did the idea or the drive to play in a band come into the picture?
The drive pretty much right away.
Okay.
Like I said, I went to a lot of different shows, but at the age I was at, there really weren't a lot of girls in bands. Like I think trying to think the 2 that I can think of is Candace from Walls of Jericho and then the keyboardist from Winds of Plague. That was
Mhm.
like the 2 girls. And then there was like a couple local bands where it was like this girl Cassie sang in a band, but they were always like smaller and it was still very much like almost a spectacle type thing like whoa, there's a girl.
Mm.
So I definitely saw it and was like I could do this. This would be sick. I would love to play in a band. But I felt like when I was younger, like nobody really took me seriously. Like when I was like, I really want to start a band, like everyone was like, oh yeah. And I talked a bit about this like a little bit on Joe's podcast, like the This Is Hardcore podcast.
Mhm.
I got so frustrated because it was like people that didn't know how to play instruments or were like really bad, but it was like their boy, like they would get in a band with them. And I'd be like,
Totally.
well, I want to play in a band. They were just like, yeah, but it's like we're trying to just like straight up hardcore. And I was like, yeah, I'm trying to do that too. Like
Yeah.
so, yeah, it was definitely tough, getting into it at first. Like, Year of the Knife was actually the first band and I learned to play bass. Like, I'd played guitar before, but I learned to play bass for Year of the Knife. So that was, like, the first, like, 2015, 2016, and, I'd been going to shows for quite some time at that point.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's like there's a few things to break down there. The first being like, yeah, like there really shouldn't be any barriers based off like musical proficiency of being able to do it. Like
Yeah.
I've started bands with people that are like learning to play the bass or
Yeah.
learning to do vocals or whatever it is. And if anything, I think it's cooler to be able to like um, be able to be a part of someone's initial journey versus like, oh, I'm playing in the
Yeah.
band with the dude that's been playing in bands for 10 years. But he
Right,
also
right.
plays in 6 other bands, so it's actually really hard for us to do that versus the person
Yeah.
that's like it's their very first band, but they're like so like eager and hungry to be able to do different things. And
Yeah.
that should be you people should be able to recognize that whether it's like your boy or just someone at a show who isn't just a dude, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think now too, like, obviously, it's cool because it's not such a, like I think before it was jarring in a way because you didn't see it, and now it's just like the norm, which is cool. And like, there's definitely still an imbalance, but not the way it was before.
Hmm.
Um, and like another thing that I think is cool is like sometimes people will come up and be like, "Oh, like I've always wanted to play in a band. Like I think it's cool." And I'm like, "Just go learn an instrument."
Hmm.
Like it's yeah, like you do need like some musical ability and talent, but like you can teach yourself musical ability. Like I think a lot of people feel like it's out of reach because they were like, "Well, I didn't do it when I was younger," or, I'm kind of like tone deaf, whatever. It's like, well, if you practice and you want it, like you could do it.
Yeah.
Like I feel that way.
Yeah, I like how you said like there's still an imbalance, but there definitely has been like so much progress, especially in the
Yeah.
last decade, when it comes to just like not having it be like the one girl at a show who was also, playing X position in a band. And
Right, right.
I see that especially at like different fests that I go to, where it's like, especially for bands that I like have no, I guess, prior knowledge to. I'm like, oh, like the lead guitarist of this band, with someone who's femme presenting or whatever it is. Like, I think that's
Yeah.
really cool. And it definitely, there was maybe a time where it's like, oh, well, if it's a girl in the band, they probably only do this position or this. But I think we're
Right.
starting to see more and more like, um, you know, like more and more roles filled and more diversity with the members and the people who are on stage versus like, here's another band with 5 or 4 white dudes,
Yeah.
or white cis men or whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's definitely I think hardcore is like in a good place. I think there's always room for more progress, but I think it definitely is very refreshing and cool to see, especially for like younger kids that are getting into it and like um younger girls like specifically like will come up, and I think that that's cool that it's not a weird thing for them to see. They're like, I love this band and this band. Like they like have like a whole list of people that they look up to like musically or that they can identify with and see themselves in.
Hmm.
Um and I mean, hopefully someday it gets to the point where it's like past gender in general and it's just straight up about the music.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And this is, it's funny. I was talking to Jordan before you came on. It's like, I can imagine that there are certain interviews where that you go on that are just like, oh, here comes like the question about like you're a girl in a band. And it's like I
Yeah.
don't want like I've done interviews with people where it's like we never hit on it. I kind of feel out like how early or if ever it's brought up. But
Yeah, yeah.
something that's obviously a very timely example of your musical journey is like switching from the bass and now fronting Year of the Knife. And to me, I can't recall a hardcore band in the last couple of years, at least within my knowledge. I'm sure there might be one or two, but I haven't seen a band of your guys' scale that has made that shift where, like the term female fronted usually is tossed at bands where the vocalist is a woman from the get go, but now it's like
Mhm.
kind of switched over. So it's like to any, we already know that that's a very whack thing to say, but to
Yeah.
me that's like almost a nail in the coffin. Like there's no point to say this anymore because
Right,
you're
right.
seeing Maddie now on the vocal sound absolutely terrifying, and there hasn't been a switch up in the music because of a switch up when it comes to that. I don't know if you have any thoughts or opinions on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely, one of the things I would always joke around, like, with my friends that sang for bands about, the female fronted thing, that, like, label, especially, I thought it was funny, like, the first tour we did was, with me singing was Europe for June, and there were people that would come up and they'd be like, "You sound like Arch," "You sound like Arch Enemy," or "You sound like Walls of Jericho," or "You sound like," but I was like, "They're badass." Like, I think our voices are different, but I was like, I you never know, like, is the comparison being made? Like, before, I remember people would always be like, anytime there was a girl vocalist, they'd be like, "She sounds like" for fans of Punch, and I was like,
Right, right.
the vocalist of Punch has, like, a raw, distinctive voice that is very unique that was not similar to anything that people were comparing to,
Hmm.
and, I think that's something that I'm interested in seeing. I have seen, like, a few things pop up since we released the EP being like a few like female fronted lists, like check out these bands, and it was like Year of the Knife now female fronted. I'm like, uh, all right,
Jeez. Oh
like
God.
it's I'm not a fan, but like I think a lot of people, their hearts are in a good place. Like I remember I kind of got into an argument with this one guy that was like, you're actually being very like divisive and like non-inclusive by saying you don't like this term. And I was like, first of all, you're a dude. No. But like, but like also I was like, I get that you're trying to highlight women in music, but you can do it in a way that's not like tokenizing or comparing them to each other because they simply present as female. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's just
Totally.
like there's ways to compare bands and there's ways to um like what one of the like you can compare people that actually sound alike, whether they're male or female, that's tight.
Mhm.
But don't just do it because you're like, that's also a girl in a band. Did you know? It's like,
Right.
I did notice that.
Right. Yeah. I think it's like the same way where I look at the back end analytics of this podcast. And when it's like, like a goal of mine is like, I would love one day to be able to be like, the demographics are not in the 90% like men category, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, and just having that number shift a little bit more to having people who are non-binary, or women, or any of that like side of things, where it's not like, oh, this is a dude's podcast, or things like
Yeah.
that. And I think the way to do that is to like, making it just like welcoming people and just thinking about like, okay, like I want to make sure that I can hit these things, but also like not doing it in a tokenizing way, but it's like I genuinely like this person's music. And I
Yeah.
think we're again seeing more of that, where it's like dope music is being put out, and then when you look at the lineup of people, it's like, oh, this is
Yeah.
awesome that it's not just a whitewashed hardcore band from X part of the world.
Right. And I think it's just like you're saying, like I think there's ways to put emphasis on good music where you're not focusing so much on like a person's gender or race. Like you're just like, this music is piss. This is
Mm,
fucking heavy. Like, and that's like what, like I said before, that's what I would hope like at some point it gets to. And I think that another thing that's probably important to note is that the fans of the music and the people in the music, like there's a reason that the data is so skewed. It's because like the audience and the band members are very much represented, like mainly male, mainly white guys.
sure.
Um, that's definitely shifting, but I think that everyone making good strides, like I feel like sometimes pointing out the statistics, like of course those are the statistics for right now.
Hmm.
You can't like be mad at your podcast or this particular fest. Like I've seen that happen before where like certain fests are like called out and I'm like, I feel like it's not the fest's fault if there's not a ton of diversity. Like I think
Oh
that it
yeah,
should
because
just
it's like, yeah, like we're totally ignoring logistics and like people's like availability
yeah,
based off the
who
other
was
things.
asked?
Yeah,
Yeah, like
exactly.
who was asked, who's working on it behind the scenes.
Who's got new music coming out? Like there's
Right,
so many
right.
layers to that for sure. Yeah, that's a great point.
I think yeah, and I think the most important thing is just to make sure that the shows that you do play and like the bands that are playing, like make sure that the people that come to the shows feel welcome.
Hmm.
Like regardless of how they identify, regardless of what they look like, they should feel comfortable and at home at your show. Like everybody's there to have a good time, listen to heavy music. There shouldn't be bullshit between the people attending. Like
Yeah.
you shouldn't be dividing each other like that.
Yeah. So you were mentioning like the first time that you were doing vocals for Your Knife was when you went over to Europe.
Yeah.
Which another thing too that's interesting is that like this is not the first singer switch up for Year the Knife. Like even before
Yes.
Tyler was doing it, like there was someone even beforehand. So
Yeah.
was I guess like before we get into Europe, was that like switch up because there was already one that already took place? Was that a little less daunting versus like, oh my gosh, it's an entirely new thing for us on the vocal side? Or
Yeah.
was it like, oh well, we've done this before, so I think we could do it again?
It was daunting in the sense that uh we I only had 3 days to practice. Like I only like really knew that I was going to be singing like 4 days before we left.
Wow.
So that was a little daunting that I was like, yeah, I've done backups and like, yeah, I like to sing, but I feel like I didn't have like it's weird. I feel like Europe was like make it or break it, like just fucking do
Mm,
it rather than doing backups and playing bass. Like a lot of times I felt like I wasn't within my own body, if that makes sense. Like I'm just like thinking about what I'm doing and thinking about people watching. Like it's hard to just be present.
right.
And because I kind of had to just jump into it for vocals, I was like, okay, just like go for it. And I ended up just having fun and not fixating so much on like, oh, that wasn't a great line or like, oh, I need to like be stronger here. Like I just was having fun with it and like feeling the music. And that was a really, really nice thing.
Hmm.
Um, Another thing was like, I think it was just like I knew all the songs so much just from playing them on bass. So it wasn't as scary. The thing that was fucked up was we practiced like twice a day for 3 days. And on the 3rd day, like the second time we tried to run the set, my voice, I was like, ah, and then I was like, fuck, my voice is
The red
totally gone.
flags are going off.
No,
Yeah.
I was like, we fly tomorrow. Like, this is really bad. Cause like doing the practice, I was like, I can do it. And then suddenly I was like, can I do this? Or is my voice just going to be gone for the rest
Right.
of this tour?
Yeah, I
Um,
don't know what that sound or where it's like the whip, where like the alarm kind of in your
the
head.
siren, the
Yeah.
Kill Bill sirens are going off. I was
Yeah,
like, fuck,
yeah,
fuck.
yeah, exactly.
No, yeah, no, it was. And I was like, I'm also like, I was very maybe over dramatic, but I was like, I'm not speaking for the next like 24 hours. So I just didn't. I like literally went upstairs and made tea and I was like typing out answers to
You
things. And
took a
everyone was
vow
like,
of
just,
silence.
yeah, everyone was like, just talk. And I was like, no, no talking.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, and then on the plane, like, didn't talk. And then luckily it was like we got there the next day we played a show. Our first show was like in Germany, was Sick of It All. And I was like, all right, doing sound check. Like, let's see if it works. And it was like my voice was back.
Oh
And
wow. So
yeah, and I
you
was
had
like,
like a
thank
progress bar to like regain all your health when it comes to your
yeah.
voice.
Yeah. No, literally. And I just slept like the whole fucking time on the plane. I was just like out. But
Hmm.
yeah. And I actually we ended up playing a show in Dortmund? It was somewhere else in Germany, like, halfway through the tour, and it was, like, Walls of Jericho, Terror, Vain, Drain. It was a crazy show, like, super stacked, and, I actually ran into Candace there, and I was, like, asking, like, "Do you ever lose your voice still?" She was like, "Always. Usually, like, the 2nd or 3rd day, it's, like, gone, and then the 4th show sucks, and then it's back."
Mm.
And I was like, "Oh, so maybe that was good that I kind of, like, broke my voice to, like, have it because I didn't lose it for the rest of that tour,
Oh,
and,
interesting. So it's kind
yeah,
of like there's one initial like, oh, I
like
pushed it a little too far, but then maybe it's
yeah.
like not warmed up, but you've like everything after that is more gravy, maybe. I don't
Yeah,
know.
like, I feel like it's, like, more conditioned or I don't really know, I'm still
Mm,
figuring it out, but, I have found that, like, practicing before we leave and making sure that it's not, like I think going into the tour, if you just start and you haven't been practicing ahead of time, like, that's when you can fuck your voice up, at least from what I found from the
mm.
few tours singing, yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that idea though, where it's like you're practicing, you're flying out the next day, and you're like, don't even ask me if I got my passport, or like I will just either show it
I
to
was just
you
like
or might learn some sign
literally
language over the when we're flying there. I don't know.
yeah, literally, like and Brandon was just like, "You're being so dramatic," but I was
Mhm.
just like, "It worked. The
Yeah,
silence
well, yeah,
worked."
you can't downplay the power of like a lot of rest,
Yeah,
both for your body as well as your voice. So,
yeah,
yeah, that's a hack. Just like valve silence until you have to fucking scream into the mic.
yeah.
With like, I'm sure like if you're not saying anything, I'm sure your brain is almost like overloading on the thoughts and thinking about everything going into that.
Yeah, I had, like, a bit of anxiety, but I feel like just feeling like doing the practices and feeling like when my voice was there, we sound good, and I feel like I can do it, and everybody feels like because these shows that we were playing that Europe tour were, like, the biggest shows that we'd ever played, like, we had
Right. Yeah.
Hellfest, we had Outbreak Fest, we had Jera on Air, so it was one of those things where it was like I don't know, it's just kind of like you can do it, like, just try to, like, level out and just sleep, and that's literally what I did. I just kind of, like, meditated and slept for the entire flight and then was like, "We're good. We can do this."
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very cool. So, you kind of like start doing because originally the idea is like we'll just fill in, like I'll step up to do vocals, then you guys come to the decision. It was like, okay, I'm gonna just front this band going forward. And then I'm sure the idea of like, okay, we need to record new music already.
Yeah.
So as far as the time of recording this episode, because someone could be listening to this in 2 years or whatever the fuck. But y'all put out an EP, Dust to Dust, that was recorded with friend of the show, Taylor Young. Um,
Taylor.
and so let's talk about that as well as, maybe some other plans for new music down the line. But talk to me about your recording time with Taylor.
Yeah, for sure. So we had actually been working on new songs. We've been working on a lot of new music that we like kind of started writing during the pandemic
Mm,
because the 2020 we were like supposed to be on tour for like 7 or 8 months. Like we were supposed to be like gone that
yeah.
year.
Yeah.
And then obviously the pandemic happened and then I think that just from being like a bit stir crazy, we were all listening to a lot of music at home, writing a lot of music. And so we had these songs like pretty much structured out, but once we got back, we were like, "Okay, let's really, like, figure out what we wanna do." And we had enough material where we were like, "We wanna release" like, we had the idea for the surprise EP, we were just like, "Let's put that out first, while we're working on all this music." And it ended up, like, timing-wise, working out perfect to go with Taylor. And we stayed, with our friend Xavier, who plays in Upon Stone and Vamakara,
Right.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, Zabalba sometimes. He does
A
it all.
lot of power. Yeah. He's in like
Yeah, yeah,
every
yeah.
LA band.
He does it all. But,
Yeah.
yeah, we stayed at his house, and then Taylor actually lives, like LA's kind of or Van Nuys is kind of weird, like, where they live, it's like they're on the same street, but there's a street in between, so you can't just, like, drive straight, you have to, like, go up and around.
Right.
But we
Yeah.
it was literally close enough to walk, and I was like, "This is perfect." So we would
Hmm.
just get up, go to Taylor's. Taylor was, like, another person that I was super excited to record with because, like, I love, 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 love his bands. Huge, like, Nails Head, Love Twitching Tongues, Disgrace, Ruckus, all the bands that he's done, I'm a huge fan of, and then, Dead Body is also super sick, the new band
Yes.
they have.
Man's got a healthy resume.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Literally, I saw him tweet the other day, he was like, "I put these all out before I was 22," like, just putting, like, the records, and I was just like,
Dude. Yeah.
Must be nice." Like, uh, but yeah, it was, like, funny because I was a little bit, intimidated. I kind of knew Taylor, but I knew Colin,
Mm,
and I'd always known, like, Colin to be kinda, like, goofy, more outgoing, and Taylor was kind of, like, more reserved, so I was
mhm.
just like, "What's going on in that insane riff brain of his?" But, he was, like, super nice, we clicked right away. He had, 2 cats and a dog, and I'm very big on, like,
Pets.
I don't know, pets, I love
Yeah.
it. I love honestly, like, Xavier having a cat and then Taylor having 2 cats, I was like, ideal recording process right
Yes.
here. But yeah, we just kinda, like, went in there, um, we kind of talked about, like, what we were looking for production-wise, like, sound-wise, and we were all, like, very much on the same page, and, the twins are kind of, like, psycho and can track things, like, usually in about a take.
Mhm.
They might, like, do a couple, but, like, they're very, very quick, so I like, the first day we went in, I was like, "Alright, we're gonna do drums one day, guitars one day, and then vocals the last day," and I was, like, pretty stressed because I'd been practicing recording, like, sending demos to Taylor, but it's a very different, it's kinda like it's a different monster singing live to recording. You have all
Totally.
this adrenaline, like, you can feel, like, the energy of the room when you're, like, doing it live. There's so much like, I don't know, I feel like that really pushes you to get your best sound, and then when it's just you and you can hear yourself, like, back so critically, it's it does something, like, very fucked up where you're like, "I forgot
Yeah,
how to
it's
sing."
the
Like
it's the recording like the recording anxiety where it's
Yeah,
once you're like to your point when you're in a live setting, even if you don't nail a line or whatever
yeah,
the fuck happens, the train is going, so you have to keep up
yeah.
with the train. But
You
when
can't
it's
be like,
like,
"Wait, wait, I wanna do that one again." Like, it's like, no, the song has
yeah.
already continued, nobody even cares,
Yeah.
like,
And even if you're
everybody
just
just wants to
recording with a
mosh.
homie or whatever and it's just them, it's still like, this process of trying to like give that same level of intensity and adrenaline while being in a very like, you have no power behind you. It's really just all of you at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, that was very daunting, and I remember texting Taylor being like, "I think I forgot how to sing since coming home, like, I don't know what is going on," but because we did that tour, in Europe, we did a tour with the Acacia Strain and sang with Sogabog, and I was, like, feeling really good on that, and then, like, coming to record, I was like, "Why do I suck? Like, what's going
Yeah.
on?" And, Taylor actually taught me a trick that I didn't end up using in the studio, but when I was demoing, I found it helped a lot, which is where, like, you hold a microphone, so it's like if you're recording here, you're holding a mic, like, just below it,
Mhm.
and I, like, literally, like, plugged it in as if it was a real mic, and, like, that just made me feel like I don't know.
Oh,
You know
that's
what I mean?
really
It's like
interesting.
the feeling it's like your body remembers it,
Yeah,
so, like,
it's
it
more like
gets you more
muscle
into it.
memory, the posture of
Yeah.
holding a microphone versus like it's on the stand and it's got the pop filter and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so
very cool. Mhm.
I found that helped me, like, a ton to do demos, and then, something else that was interesting, like, once we got into the studio so Andy tracks drums, and he does them, like, first day, he does all 3 songs, like, he's just, like, done, and Taylor was like, "Well, that was easy. Do you guys wanna get lunch? And then Maddie, do you wanna track?" And in my mind, I'm like, "I'm not tracking till the 3rd day," so I was like,
Right.
like, yeah, I can, like, I'll try, I don't know, I wasn't he was like, "I mean, it'll be good." He was like, "I think that doing a song a day will be really good because 'cause you'll come back each day stronger if you don't blow your voice out." And I was like, "Alright." And, my friend Greg Falchetto from, Jersey, he does, like, Back to School Jam, sang in the Mongoloids, Hold My Own, um, awesome dude, but he always records vocals with Taylor, and he was just telling me, like, Taylor is awesome, like, he gets the best sound, like, it's super chill in the studio, so he was like, "You'll have, like, a very easy time recording with him, you don't need to be, like, stressed about it."
Mhm.
So we, like, came back from lunch and then, like, worked a little bit to, like, get the levels and everything right, and then I tracked, like, most of Control C that day, and then, like, towards the end, Taylor was like, "Okay, stop," and I was like, "No, I think I could do it better." He was like, "You're done for today,"
Mhm.
and, like, he could, like, hear it. It's like a slight drop in your voice where it's like he was like, "Yeah, I think that, like, you should wait and then patch the rest of this tomorrow,
Mhm.
and then do the next song tomorrow." So that's what we ended up doing, like, next day, it was, like, guitars recorded, and then I think I did Victim the 2nd day, and then it was, like, next day bass recorded, and then I tracked, like, the last song, Dust to Dust, for the vocals. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm not an expert, I've done not a ton of recorded material, but what I would say to anybody that's, like, struggling or stressed out about recording, that worked so well for me, like, just trying to do a song a day,
Mhm.
if you have the time to do it, because really, if you do record until like, not past the point of blowing your voice out, the next day, you're, like, already there. Like, it's like when you're touring and you're just conditioned and, like, ready.
Right. Yeah,
So,
that's very
that was awesome.
helpful, not only to people listening, but to myself as well, because like, I'm gonna be singing in a band, you know, eventually, well, there is something down the pipeline, but like that has been
Ooh.
something I was talking with. I have a side project where I just am playing guitar, and I
Mhm.
drove my vocalist home the other night, and we were just talking about that, like recording booth anxiety and like not being able to like do I guess what you did live, but like just the idea of like trying to mimic what you would be doing in a live setting within the vocal booth for that to
Yeah.
help. That's very interesting. That's a life hack if anything. But the
Yeah.
second thing is like, yeah, just like trying to do one thing a day and not trying to over push yourself. Um,
Right.
do you like try to do any like certain warm up things, or like you got any specific recording bevs that you
Recording bevs.
yes.
Okay, so what I will say is I found that tea after is awesome, tea before sucks.
Okay.
Room temperature water, awesome.
Before and
If
after, or all the way through?
yeah, all the way through,
Okay.
but, like, not I know this sounds, like, stupid too, but, like, not a ton, and that was something that Taylor told me, like, don't, like, constantly flood your vocal cords. He was like, "If you need to take a drink, but don't, like, between every take,
You're trying to
drink, because
just
then it's
guzzle.
like."
Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, so it's just, like, just pacing it, but that was something that I used to always think like, even recording backups, I was like, "Okay, I need, like, hot tea and honey," and it's like, that I feel like it doesn't, it coats your vocal cords in a weird way that you're not getting your natural sound,
Hmm.
and as you're trying to push your natural sound, you're kind of fucking your voice up. But I mean, I think it's whatever makes you comfortable because, like, there's death metal singers that do a shot of whiskey beforehand. Like, Brandon drinks a can of Coke while he's recording,
Oh,
and
okay.
he gets, like, nasty ass, like, gutturals from it. So I think it's just, like it's whatever you feel and you feel, like, comfortable with it. But I can tell there's certain things that I do that I'm like, "It was better before I did this," and,
Hmm.
like, tea for me is more about, like, the healing it afterwards and then, like, going into the next day.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
had
for
someone
sure.
on recently who's he plays in like a like I would say that they're a heavy hardcore band, but they definitely have like beat down and almost like slam influence as well. But
Right.
he's one of the most talented vocalists I know from Oklahoma specifically. And he was like, "Yeah, like I smoke cigarettes, like I drink beer when I'm
Yeah.
recording, but like that allows me to like kind of get that nastiness that I'm
Yeah.
known for." So and other people who've come on the podcast who are like recording engineers, they've told me like don't try to like change up your normalcy of what you're doing.
Yes.
Like if you have a rhythm, even if it's like a little fucked up, like if you're eating pizza beforehand or you're like I have to have a fucking, even if it's food or drink aside, if it's like I need to not have a vow of silence for a day or whatever it is, like
Yeah.
finding what works with you and just sticking with that and not switching that for every recording session is the move for
Right.
sure.
Well, and that's another thing I think you can get so in your head about, like, do I sound weird because I had, like, cheese today? You know what I mean? Like, because that's something people are like, "Don't eat dairy." And you're
Right.
like, "Wait, did I have something that had dairy in it?" And it's like, you can psych yourself out so much. And it is such a physical thing, like, when you're it sounds cheesy, but it's like your body is the instrument,
Hmm.
and you're thinking about it's like the power comes from your diaphragm, the sound comes from your vocal cords. So when you aren't able to perform from a mental standpoint, that does fuck up like physically how you sound.
Hmm.
So you kind of just have to like find the comfort in it. And Taylor was talking to me about that when I was demoing because he was like you said, like don't change up, a ton of what you're doing. He was like, I would recommend these things, but like if you come in and you're like, no, I love drinking a glass of milk before I record, like that's like some people do that because they get like a like weird like gurgly sound from it,
Sure.
and it's like just do what you find. I will say, the best day that I tracked, we went out and got pho for lunch, and I got like super spicy pho, and then I was like, "Oh no, was this a bad idea?" But it wasn't. It was like,
Okay. So
yeah,
that's
that
actually
was
the
that
secret
was the
weapon is
move.
spicy pho.
Yeah, it was, dude.
um,
Also, Taylor, we were all just like in awe because it was like sriracha and then like the bulldog sauce, he was just, like, holding them down, like, filling the pho with it. We were like, "That is an insane amount of spice
yo,
and
when is
flavor."
Taylor going on Hot Ones is the real question.
He should. I think he would be fine. I think he would do great.
Yeah.
Very very stoic, like, the whole time. He
Before
would do
one
the bo
question even hits, he's just like eating all of the wings. He's like, "Are we
Yeah.
done? Can we record some
He's
music?"
he's like, I actually have to get back, record. So,
Yeah.
this was cool."
Yeah.
Downs the bomb.
Yeah. Oh, dude. Have you ever had the bomb?
No. So, I think it was, like, 2019, we did a tour, and this kid in we were in the UK, I can't remember exactly where, but we stayed he, like, had us stay at his house, and his
Mhm.
house was awesome, had, like, a ton of rooms, it was, like, this old giant house, and on the kitchen table, he had the bomb just, like, sitting there, and the twins were like, "I gotta try that," and I was like, "Absolutely not." And both of them it's so funny because like, they love spicy food, and they like, we all used to watch Hot Ones and shit together,
Mhm.
and I could tell they were like, "It's fine," and I was like, "You guys are in pain right
Oh,
now. This sucks so bad for you." And both of them were just like, "No, it's fine, it's good. It doesn't taste good." And I was just like, "Yeah, that's why I didn't try it because I was just like, I see people's
I
reactions."
mean, there's a
Like
reason that that's the longest standing reoccurring hot sauce on that show is because it's
yeah.
the effect of it is like is is time and time again. I was on a trip with my wife. We were at a random spot. We were on Vancouver Island of all places, and they had it at some weird like local grocery store. I was like, I need to buy it. Like
I
this is
need
the
to
only
know.
time I've seen it in the wild. Um, So, so I bought it, lived in the fridge for a long ass time, and then we were having um friends stay over, and then they were like, oh yeah, like like I'm the bev god, so I'm like, oh yeah, just grab something from the fridge. And then they're like, oh, you have the bomb. I was like, oh right, yeah. And then I was like, I feel like now is when we try it. But like going zero to hero was like the worst decision ever, because it's like I was
Yeah.
like, I feel like my eyes melting, it's that
Yeah.
bad.
Even
um
I smelled it and I was like, I can tell this is not a good time.
Yeah, and I
Like
feel like even like the higher end hot sauces, or even some of the mid ones, it's like at least there's taste and there's things to enjoy
right.
there. Like my nickname is Spicy Spence, but like I was suffering when I had that. So I'm not
Dude.
discouraging people to do it, but I'm just saying, like, humble thyself when
Yeah.
the bomb hits you, for sure.
Try it, but prepare for pain. Well, and
Yes,
that's what the twins said too. They were like, "It just tastes bad. Like, it's really, really hot and it tastes bad. Like,
right.
it's not like, woo, like this is like a nice, like chili, like it's kind of too hot, but it has a good flavor.
Yeah.
Gnarly."
It's literally like a nuclear bomb going off on your taste buds, and you're like,
Yeah.
just the meme from Terminator 2, where it's like you're hanging onto the fence and everything is just disintegrating you.
Dude,
Put out that new music super recently as well.
yeah.
What's the response been like, at least from your perspective?
It's been crazy. Like we actually put it out last Thursday, so it hasn't even been out a week yet. Um, and I was kind of interested. I mean, I think the internet is a strange place because it's sometimes it can turn into such like a negative, shitty thing.
Hmm.
And I was just like, I love this music. I'm super proud of these songs. Like, I'm just excited to get them out and have people hear them. Like, but I'm curious, of course, to see what people think. And literally, like everywhere, people were super, super positive. Um, that's also another thing, like, when you change vocalists, it's like you worry that people will be, like, overly critical or,
Hmm.
like,
Yeah.
negative, but, people are just, like, super, super positive, and a lot of my friends that, are vocalists, like, my friend Jake that sings for Judiciary, and then, like, Vincent from the Acacia Strain, uh, Scott from Tear, Brendan from Counterparts, like, people that we toured with were like, "Dude, you sound awesome, like, this is fucking sick."
That's very cool.
Really really
Yeah.
excited for the music, so that was, like, really nice to hear, especially to people that I look up to a lot as vocalists and musicians. Like, I was kind of like, all right, I'm doing okay. And
Hmm.
like, um, I saw a lot of people say they were like their favorite songs, and they're like, I feel like they're all of our favorite songs. Until like the new material that we have too. So yeah, it was a very, very like overwhelmingly positive sort of feeling. And I feel really grateful for the reception, and like we're gonna be playing them live. Like we played them on the Acacia Strain tour, but people didn't know them then.
Right.
Um, so it'll be cool to play them, maybe see if anybody learned the words in like a
Oh,
week.
I'm sure many people know
Maybe.
the words.
That would be tight. It would be
Hmm.
tight to see. But
Um,
yeah.
is there anything that you can say? I'm sure there's more that you can't, as far as the other new music that's on the way, but is there anything that you want to say, as far as, where, who, and what people can expect from
Yeah.
that material?
So we don't have necessarily a timeline, but I think we kind of like confused the shit out of people because we were like posting in the studio with Taylor and they were like, they're working on an LP. And then we were posting in the studio with Kurt and they were like, what are they doing? Like,
Like, is this a
what's
collaboration thing, or
yeah,
what?
like they were like, are they both? And then I saw people being like, they recorded these with Kurt. And I was like, nope, the EP was with Taylor.
Yeah.
But we did, the timeline was kind of nuts. Like we recorded with Taylor and then we went and recorded some songs with Kurt like 2, 3 weeks after.
Yeah.
So it was very like we had just been like
Busy month
really
for You're the Night.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, like we've had this time, like we had like even last year when touring was back, it was like we had all these opportunities that were turned down. And like we just kind of were like, all right, well, let's fucking focus on writing. Like let's
Hmm.
just like do our best to like get the best songs that we can. But yeah, we went back to Kurt. It was fucking cold, but it was the best. It was so weird. It was like we were in LA and it was like super nice weather. Like I don't know, just like surrounded by friends, sun, all that shit. And then it
Right.
was like I felt like we traveled to Antarctica. Like it was so fucking cold. Um, I also like I don't know how I even did this, but I like forgot to pack a jacket to Salem, Massachusetts.
Oh,
So I was constantly stealing the twins' jackets, and then at one point I went and finally like bought one. Um, but yeah, it was like it's so cool to be back with Kurt because we recorded in internal incarceration with him, and we are we weren't able to get tested because this was January 2020 that we recorded with Kurt.
right. Okay.
So, this is when, like, we got home from recording at the end of January, and I remember seeing on the news, like, I can't remember. Oh, I think I was at, like, the nail salon with my friend, and I saw on the news that, like, coronavirus, sweeping Wuhan, China, and I was like, "Oh, I hope that they're okay." That's, like, so crazy.
Hmm.
And it was, like, not even a thought, like, "I hope
To-
the world will be okay." It was just
yeah,
like,
yeah.
"Oh, that's awful." Like,
Everyone, whenever they see anything like that, it's like it's just isolated to wherever that's
yeah.
going. Yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah, it was like I just thought of it the same way like avian flu. Like I was just like,
Hmm.
"Oh, that's like really rough. Like hopefully like they can find a vaccine and like the people are safe." And then like out of my mind, but I hadn't thought at all like recording, we were all so fucking sick. Like all of us more sick than we'd ever been. I was like going to sleep um like, I had, like, a Yeti bottle, and I would fill it with boiling water, and then I would go to sleep because I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I couldn't breathe, and I would just drink, like, the hot like, it wasn't boiling at that point, but it was still hot from whenever I went to sleep, and I would just, like, chug it, and I was sitting there, like, hacking my lungs out, and everybody's, like, coughing in their sleep, like, feeling like shit, and we're just like, "Oh, this is, like, the worst fucking flu I've ever had." And
Dude.
then it's, like, a couple months later they're like, "Coronavirus is in America." It could have been here as early as November. We're like, "Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, we
like
definitely had COVID."
literally at band practice the other day, I was like talking about um one of my bands had a weekend of shows where we had a show just north of us, like a couple hours, and then a
Mm.
local show. And driving up to that first show, our vocalist was just like, he had never been more sick. And he just got
Ugh.
back from LDB Fest, where anyone who was at
Ooh.
LDB 2020 talks about this infamous LDB plague, which,
Yeah,
people have joked is like an
coronavirus.
early COVID thing. But
Yeah.
like literally, we played that show. We drove back the same night, and we were like first up for this next show. Like, this is even before we put out any music, and he like wasn't at the show, and I had to like drive to his house, and he was like like his body was like, no, you are not waking up through
No.
any alarms. And I'm just like, go 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 go, like, just, we gotta go play a
Get up.
gig. And he's like, and it was like a bad show on his part just because of how sick he was.
Yeah.
But man, it's wild to think, yeah, it's like different things. I also just, the visual of you just like, I'm sleeping with this Yeti bottle, that's just like
I literally
almost
was
like
like
like a water thermos or something.
it literally like well, and that's what I told Kurt, and he was like, "For warmth?" And I was like, "No, you can't feel the heat from it." I was like waking
Right.
up and drinking it because I would wake up and I'd be like, like, can't breathe.
Yeah.
And he was just like, "Oh, yeah." But Kurt was weirdly the only person that didn't get sick.
Mm.
Zach, that also, he's like the assistant engineer, and he also is a recording engineer for a lot of bands and shares the space in God City. Zach was sick as fuck. I think we got
Yeah.
Zach sick. Sorry, Zach.
Sorry, Zach.
And then Zach was making like some fucked up potions, basically. Like it was like like fresh garlic just like blended up with like boiling water. And then I don't even know if he put honey in it. And he was like, just drink this. And I was like, I'm good. I'm straight on that.
I don't need to have any fucking Emperor's New Groove like turn into some fucking animal off of your weird
Yeah.
experimental shit.
Yeah. Dude, it was fun. And like honestly, it was one of those things where it was like only time made it better, but we were sick all of recording and into February. Like we were all like pretty
That's
much out
wild.
for like almost a month.
Yeah. So
So
shout
yeah.
out to all the people that got the beta version of COVID before it was
Yeah.
mainstream, but
Yeah. We got to test it. It wasn't good. I
mhm.
wouldn't recommend.
I would not.
But it was cool. So long story aside, it was really
Yeah, I
cool
was like,
being
where
able
did
to go.
we? Oh yes,
Where do we
recording
go?
with Kurt. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was cool to be able to go back to him, not be sick as fuck. But to know the area, because that was another thing. Like we didn't go out. Like I literally like would record and then just like curl back up with my thermos.
Right.
Like it wasn't like we were exploring that much, but we knew where everything was, and like we got to meet up with some friends up there. Foreign Hands ended up coming through on tour like the last day. We all went and got coffee with our friend Sienna, and yeah, it was just it felt like a cool thing to like return to it. There was no I talked to you a little bit before we started recording. There was no like weird getting used to Kurt, like feeling like super intimidated and feeling
Right.
like
Because
holy
yeah,
fuck.
you've
Like
already done a record together. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Cause the first time it was definitely like legend. Like fuck, it's Kurt. Like not only just like I'm huge Converge fan, but just also he's produced and worked on so many of my favorite hardcore albums that I was like, fuck, like Heavier Than Heaven from Blacklisted. He worked on Nails. He worked on, I mean, all the Converge things. It's just he has such like a crazy list. It was kind of the same way we were like joking, like Taylor kind of when he was in the studio with Kurt looked up to him a bit and like learned a bit like over his shoulder about recording. So going to Taylor feels like more like if Kurt was like around our age, and then Kurt feels just kind of still like ethereal,
Right.
like
Sure.
a little bit.
Yeah.
But it was cool like going back because like we all know each other's sense of humor. He knows how we record. Yeah, it was a very like fun process, and we were in like go mode from recording the EP. So
Hmm.
I think that uh if you like the EP, I think you'll love the LP because we just kind of pushed that direction even more, and we have a couple things that I think will really surprise people on the
Okay.
LP. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Um, did Kurt tell you any Aerosmith stories?
He has an Aerosmith cab at God City.
Right.
Um
And
he told
just for
us
the listeners, because I've worked with Kurt on another podcast, but there is a thing in Salem where it's like everyone has an Aerosmith story because that's where they're from.
yeah.
And anytime I talk to him, he's like, "Oh, I got stories about just people being like, oh, I knew the bass player or the vocal or whatever it is." So
Yeah.
yeah.
He's definitely had like several pieces of their gear.
Hmm.
I know he still has a cab. He told us like more Aerosmith stories the first time we were there, but it really was just like it's a rite of passage if you're
Right.
in that
Totally.
area that you're like, well, my cousin's girlfriend dated this
Hmm.
person, and like, or like I have the guitar from this tour, or
Yeah.
yeah. And that the luthier that he works with often, like he's done a bunch of their guitars and shit like in
Hmm.
the past. So
Yeah.
yeah, we heard some of those stories. We heard some High on Fire stories, uh, crazy Matt Pike stories. Yeah,
Yeah.
I,
It.
I I go there for a lot of stories. I'm like, all right, story time.
Yes.
Especially if we track fast, I'm like, what do you want to tell us today about a fucked up tour? Like,
Right. Yeah. I know that if I was ever in Salem, because I think this is the other cool thing about hardcore is like the places that you never thought that you would want to travel to for whatever reasons. Like bands make those places cool.
yeah,
And like you see the venues of the videos online. You're like, I want to play here. I want to play in
yeah,
this skate shop. I want to play in this church that has foamy mattress. When you're thinking about
yeah,
Philly or
yeah.
whatever. But I feel like I would need to purchase an Aerosmith shirt in advance and only wear that when I'm walking the
You're
streets
just
just
like,
to get as many
yes.
stories as possible.
Just collect them. You could make an Aerosmith zine. You
Yeah.
probably could just from like locals.
A
Um,
hardcore
what
Aerosmith zine? That's
It
such
w
an
it would be
amazing
crazy.
idea.
Um, yeah, I think honestly for me, cooler than, like, the Aerosmith cab is there's, like, this one Converge video where, like, they're playing, and I don't know if somebody, like it's this, like, small room, it's super packed, and I don't know if somebody, like, steps on Kurt's pedal board or if his guitar just goes like, I'm not sure what the issue was,
Sure.
but he ends up throwing his guitar and moshing, and that guitar is, like, hanging upstairs in, like, the apartment above the studio, and I was just like,
Cool.
"Dude, yes!" And
Yeah.
then I sent Kurt the video of him moshing, and he was like, "LOL." Like, yep,
Yeah. Shout out to
yeah,
Kurt. I'm hoping to get him on the podcast for this season. That's definitely on the to-do list.
yeah,
Um,
fuck yeah.
so this is kind of just a random year of the knife question, and I
Hmm,
feel like because of the band name, it's very easy to like swap out like year of the blank for a
Yeah.
joke or for whatever. So when you think about that, are there like certain ones that have really gotten you, or certain ones that are just like classic year of the fill in the blank that you've heard over the years?
I'm trying to think. I feel like
Because I'm sure people were like, "Oh, it's year of the Maddie," once it was
yeah,
announced that you were
yeah,
on
yeah.
vocals.
We did tour when we toured in Europe, people like our friends were like Year of the Maddie or like Maddie of the Knife. And like I thought that was cool. Like that made
Hmm.
me like feel good just because I was like still pretty nervous and new to it.
Hmm.
I was gonna say usually it's like when we tour with another band, like they'll be like Year of the Bog or Sanguine Sugar Knife or like like just like stupid shit. And then like
Sanguisuga Bog's combination with band names is goaded because
yeah,
their
it's
name
good.
is so ridiculous.
My favorite thing for them is people like, "I love this record, but how do you say Sanguisugabog?" And they
Yes,
just reply Sanguisugabog.
right.
Like they don't there's
Yeah, they
no
spell it
phonetics.
out.
They just
Yes.
like they just say it. And yeah, I'm trying to think. We actually were talking about this. I think the most common thing that we see is they'll be like, whatever year it is the year of the knife. That's happened like
Ah, okay.
every year. Like
Yeah,
2020 is the year of the knife.
yeah,
2021 is the year of the, and then we got that like we put the EP out and they're like 2023 is the year of the knife. I was like, that's dope.
yeah.
It's like funny because it's just like it's just goofy shit, but
Mhm.
it's nice to feel feel the love from the jokes.
Yeah. It's almost like
Yeah.
there needs to be a Twitter account. Like there's one is like, "Is it Christmas?" And it's like every day that person's tweeting no until there's
Is
actually
it
a
year
Christmas.
of the knife?
So it's like on
Now it's
January 1st, it's just like let's just keep that train going.
it is every first
Every
starts a new year.
Yes, true, true. So, Maddie, this is very exciting because, for fans of Scoped, just this past weekend, as far as the time of recording this, launched our Patreon, which was a huge endeavor. And, I'm sure as someone who's also creative, that that's a big step for anyone, for
Yeah, for
whatever
sure.
they do. So, it's very cool to document the very first Patreon question that is coming. So, no, normally what we do is we notify the patrons a couple days before of, hey, we're chatting with Maddie or we're chatting with this guest. And if you're of a certain tier, people can submit questions, and then I feel like that can spark some cool dialogue. So, I have a
Cool.
Patreon question from my friend Matt. And he's saying he wanted to know what was the thing that drew you to straight edge and why it's maintained its importance in your life?
That's a good question. So I think for me, it's always been a personal choice. I have a lot of family members that struggle with addiction and alcoholism, and growing up and seeing that and seeing the negative effects of alcoholism and pill addiction and being hooked on heroin, it's something that I never wanted for myself, and it's something that I identified could be a hereditary thing that I'm drawn to. Um, so for me, even at a young age, I was like, that's just something that I don't want that to be my future. I saw it for so many people in my family. I saw it for so many of my friends growing up. And it was more about the decision that I'm never going to get into that and put myself in a position where I can be addicted to it.
Mm,
And I don't think that every person that has an addict or an alcoholic in their family is doomed necessarily. But for me, it was like, why even take that chance when for me, I like the way being in control of how I feel, being in control of my mental state, at least as far as not being on any substances.
mhm.
That's just, it's not something that I've ever strayed away from or felt that um, I would grow out of. I think another thing is the reason that it is so long standing for me is, like I said, it is a personal decision. So for me, I think that straight edge is an amazing thing. And I think it's something that can help a lot of people. And it's something that you can find community in. It's something that can change your life for the better if you have struggled. Um, but I also think that it is always someone's personal choice. And I think that the people that it seems to be something that's lifelong for them are the people that it has that deep rooted meaning for them rather than worrying about what other people are doing or if they broke edge and all this shit.
Right,
You know
right.
what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's why it's always hung around for me. And I think that the same we have different stories, but I think that there's similar reasons for like the twins and Brandon why we're all straight edge.
Yeah, and I think like I've listened to some other interviews where you talk about like Delaware specifically like has certain historical aspects to like um misuse of drugs and some of those things. And so and
Yeah.
everyone's got their own individual experience of wherever they're from, but like it's definitely especially, being a Canadian and like, a lot of like the small towns that were in the surrounding areas because, Western Canada, there's a lot of space. But, usually the small town places that I would either go play shows or just had friends from there, it's like, yeah, it's like when there's nothing to do, that's the thing that, people are
Right.
unfortunately taking their, spending their time to do so.
Yeah, it's really sad. Delaware in particular, especially, I mean, it's still ongoing, but there was like a heroin epidemic. Like when we were in high school, I remember they showed us this like crazy ass I don't even know what you would call it, like PSA. It was like a video where they were showing like the negative sides of it. And they
Mhm.
literally like showed somebody like post killing themselves like on like to kids. Like they were like, this is what your life will be if you do heroin. Don't ever try heroin. Like
Man.
it was scarring, like, people were, like, crying and throwing up, and it was, like but even before seeing that, everybody had a story of, like, "Oh, my older cousin died from heroin," or, like,
Mhm.
it was either, like, somebody you knew or your friend's sibling, like, it was, like, everyone was touched by it, and, it like you said too, like, kinda touching on when there's not a ton of stuff to do. I think Delaware, it's not as rural as a lot of other places. Like it's still on the coast. You can still get to a lot of cities like easily. But I know for like a lot of my family members that live down south, like that 100% was the reason. Like I was like, why would you even try this shit? And it's like, what the fuck else is there to do? That's always what they would say.
Right. Yeah.
It's just like, better than being bored at home, better than, and it's like, it's not. It's not when it destroys your fucking life. Like,
Yeah. Totally.
um, which is another thing I think not just straight edge people in hardcore, but I think a lot of people in hardcore in general, they've seen addiction, they've been touched by it in some way. And I think that there is, even for people that aren't straight edge, I think a lot of the lyrics resonate with them because they see themselves in it, they see their friends in it, they see their brothers, their moms, their dads. So it's like for me, I would say I think that rather than there's nothing else to do, find drugs, I would say there's nothing else to do, find a show. Find a
Mm.
friend that wants to if it's far away, like, find a friend that'll drive with you.
Mhm.
Like, you become the people you surround yourself with, so keep that in mind when you're making stupid decisions or smart decisions.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like you took the words right out of my mouth because it was like, I've talked about this on the podcast before, but the short version is like I I never claimed edge, but like I was way closer to that. Like I didn't even drink for the first time until I was 22. So even when my
Yeah,
friends were like, 16, 17 and going to parties, I'm like, this is so stupid. Like it was just not something that I gravitated towards. And then even after that, like, there's a very, very much not touched majority of, drugs in general, never smoked a cigarette. I think maybe it was just not a must, but maybe it was just a part of my journey to, because bevs is a big part of who I am. And, there's certain craft beers or certain things that I really like, or like I started watching a mixology show on Netflix
oh, shit.
recently, which is like really cool to see. Like I had no idea that you can combine all these things and do all this. But to your point, when I listened to the new like Inclination record, I was like, I've never felt like more inspired by like sober living. And I think that like
Yeah,
even if you're someone that like is, maybe not it's not black or white, maybe you're somewhere in the gray when it comes to that, like, you know, I think that there's still things and lifestyle and moral decisions that you can make, even if you're not straight edge, but still listening
yeah,
to certain straight edge music. And don't get me
yeah,
wrong,
absolutely.
I love a good militant straight edge band that's just like, if you have a beer in your hand, you're gonna get fucking knocked out or whatever the fuck. But like, I think uh, overall, net wise, I think it's really cool to see, straight edge bands like You're the Knife, like Boundaries is another example where it's like we're not maybe like talking about this in every single song or having an X on every single shirt, but it's still something
Right.
that people can take away when they're, digging into the lore of the band.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, like you said, it's like militant straight edge bands are fun. And I think that uh it's like great for sing-alongs and shit like that. But I think that even a lot of people in those bands sometimes don't necessarily have the attitude of the lyrics that they're saying. Like
Sure.
and I think a lot of people that are kind of outside the scene, it's like that's their jump off point for straight edge is they're just like straight edge people hate addicts and they have no sympathy for them. And I'm like, nah, like that's not true. And
Hmm.
that's why I think it's always important to say, like, at least for me in particular, it's like I do have more empathy and understanding for people that struggle with it, but I'm also like I'm proud of being straight edge because I've seen what the other side is.
Hmm. Totally.
That's just
Yeah.
kind of like what we carry with it.
Um,
Yeah.
maybe one of the last follow-up questions that I can ask on this before we move on to Candy Corpse is like, and this is maybe a little bit of a segue question, but like, you have a lot of design and, marketing and business know-how through Candy Corpse. I like, do you think it's fair to say that straight edge wouldn't be as popular if it didn't have like, the imagery and like all of that associated with it? If it was like,
Yeah.
if like, I don't know, like the symbolism of an X alone, it like outside of that is like it's so significant as far as
It's
what
hard
it.
as fuck.
Yes, exactly.
It looks sick. No, for real, I mean, yeah, I think that's a big part of it. The imagery is hard. The like Xing up people like kind of like wondering, wanting to know more about it. Like, I don't know. I think that definitely plays a part of why people get interested in it.
Yeah.
Um,
Obviously, I don't think either of us are saying like, "Oh, only be straight edge so you can take a Sharpie to your
so you can
your
X up.
hands or something." But
Nah, but I mean, I think that's part of the history of it, and I think that's a cool part of the cultural history of straight edge,
mhm,
for sure.
mhm. So, Candy Corpse. Obviously, all
Yeah.
the video people that are watching this podcast, see, a lot of pink shit behind you. And I think people following Candy Corpse is like, that's the vibe of it. But talk to me about like the very initial stages of that, of like, hey, I'm gonna start this thing. Did you like out the get-go, you're like, this needs to be a business, or is like this is gonna be a side hustle, this is gonna be like a one-off project? Talk to me about day one or idea number one.
Idea 1. Yeah, so, I used to, like, work with one of my friends, and I would make, like, tour passes, and I still do make tour passes, just kind of, like, more on a smaller scale, but I would do, like, stickers and tour passes, and I was working as the marketing director for Delaware State Parks, and I was like I, like, loved that job, but I was also feeling kind of, like, unfulfilled. I wanted to tour, I wanted to I had these, like, creative dreams outside of just working in small state government,
Hmm.
and, I started out doing just, like, drawing up, I think I started with 3 stickers. I was, like, just drawing up Ghibli designs, and then, I put, like, the stickers out. I, like, brought them with me to This Is Hardcore one year. Then, like, I made, like, a little web shop with just stickers, and at the time, my friend Max used to I don't know if he owned Shop Shogun or if he was a co-owner, but he used to have a part in Shop Shogun, and I saw they had all of these pins for different bands, and I was like, "Dude, how do you make those?" Like, I've always wondered, and he was like, "Hey, I'll get you, like, the contact or whatever." And that's when I was like, "Maybe I could make a pin shop," because I think that the way that I draw lends itself really well. It's kind of like that almost it was, like, inspired by anime and, like, traditional tattooing where it just has, like, the bold lines
Hmm.
and everything's
Yep.
kinda, like, blocky. So, I got in contact with them. I started making, like, soft enamel pins, which are just, like, the black ones that have, like, the filling that's kinda scooped. And then from there, I started making hard enamel pins, which are more like the Disney pins you see where they, like, have the flesh color or flesh filling.
Hmm.
And yeah, it started out as something that I was just like, this is just a way to fulfill some creativity. Maybe I can learn how to do this and make some cool stuff for bands too. Like, I don't know. And then it got to the point where I would work like 40 to 50 hours a week at parks. And then I was working like 30 to 40 hours a week on Candy Corps. And I was just like a miserable fucking person to be around because I was just constantly working all the time. I was like super depressed. I was just like, I don't even know what I'm doing. And Brandon kind of sat me down. He was like, you got to pick one or the other. And he was like, if you want to quit your job and do Candy Corps, like, I think you should do it. I think it's awesome. Like, I have your back on it. But he was like, but if you want to stay working, he was like, it's too much. Like, it's too much stuff. Like, you're not taking any time for yourself, and like you're kind of just like spiraling out.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, like I think I'm gonna quit my job. But it was like really scary at the time because I'd worked really hard. I started as a part-time worker doing the website for Delaware State Parks. And then when the last marketing director left, then I went up and it was like this big series of auditions. It's super hard to get a job um, within the state at all. And it had like
Right.
good benefits and shit. So I started talking to like family members and stuff about it. All of them were like, this is a terrible fucking idea. You have, healthcare. Why would you, get rid of that? All the stuff where I was just like, no, I'm gonna go for it. Like, literally the only person that was telling me to go for it was Brandon, and I was just like, "I could do it." I think
Hmm.
I think that I can, like, if I can put all of my energy into this, I think that I can make it into something that I'm, like, actually proud of and actually can support us.
Yeah.
So
Just a question on that. Like when Brandon was bringing that up, was Candy Corpse at a scale where it was making the same amount of money as your parks job, or like was it like generating enough income where it's like okay, I could see that, or was it still like I know I have something here, but it just hasn't caught fire the way that I think it will eventually
it
in time.
yeah, it wasn't making as much as my parks job, but it wasn't like I was making, like, $1,000 for the year and was like, "I could try this."
Sure.
Like, it
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
it was, like, kind of in between, like, it was one of those things where certain releases I had it was actually one of the releases I had, I put, I think, 3 different pin designs out, and they sold out in, like, 7 minutes, and that's when I was like, "I should have ordered more of these." I didn't really like, I don't take enough time to really sit down and look at, like, the analytics and, like, the less fun side. I'm still just in, like, creative land because I
Sure.
don't have to worry about it.
Hmm.
And I was like, think if I was able to actually, like, focus in and, like, do research and put the time into this for the other side of things. And so, like, I was doing well enough where, like, with Brandon having a job, I could just do that if I could keep growing it.
Right.
But it wasn't like a trade-off for one or the other. That was like kind of the scary part. And also didn't have health benefits because you're working for yourself.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, but I ended up it was the timing of it is so weird. And like I'm very much a believer in like things. I don't know how to describe it. It's not necessarily that I believe in like fate or that things are predestined. I just think that when things happen, it's like at the timing that they were meant to.
Hmm.
And I put in my 2 weeks notice for my job, and my boss was just like, "Are you sure you wanna do this? I know you have, like, a little side business thing, but, like, I don't know if this is a good idea." And, like, he was, like, trying to talk me out of it, and I was like, "No, I made up my mind." And then it was either the next night or 2 nights later, Isaac Hale called us and was like, "Hey, so Knocked Loose is doing a full US tour. With Terror and Jesus Piece, the opener we had to drop off, so we need a new
Oh,
opener."
okay. Yeah, I understand the timeline here. Okay, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 2018, but literally it was like days. Like I put in my 2 weeks and then he was like, "Can you do this tour?" And
And
then I
you
asked
definitely wouldn't
everybody.
have been able to with the job that you have.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely not, because it was like a 5-week tour or something, like 4.5 weeks.
Yeah.
And, I was, like, asking everyone, like, "Can we do it?" And then I think one of us was like, "Well, could we do half the tour? Because 'Cause we've never done a tour that big just to, like, kinda get out." And Isaac was like, "We need somebody that can do the whole thing."
Mhm.
And I was just like, "I just quit my job." Like, yeah, let's tour, like, let's fucking do it.
Mhm.
And, so that's how we did, like, that first tour with Knock Loose. It was like we'd done weekend tours with them before, but that was, like that's why they thought of us for the opener, was just because we'd done some short stuff. So the timing of that, like you said, I never would have been able to take that tour if I kept working at parks.
Mhm.
I would have only been able to take off half of it. And a ton of people thought I quit my job to do it. And I was like, it's so like the timing of it, I was like, I probably that would have been the push, like if I hadn't decided. But I was like, the timing of it, I'm really happy that I did decide, like, okay, I'm done.
Mhm.
I'm gonna put in my 2 weeks. Um, yeah, and then from there, I kind of found this like interesting balance of bringing Candy Corpse on tour. And then for a while, Brandon's mom used to come and ship our packages from the website when we were on tour.
Right.
And then now Brandon's cousin Haley comes and she ships them when we're out. But it's been shit, that was 2018. I started the shop in 2016. Now it's 2023. Yeah, it's been one of those things where it's like just kind of finding the way because I work a lot more heavily in the analytics side and like planning. I still do a lot of the art. If I don't do the art, I do all the creative direction and I commission some of my friends for it.
Right.
And then yeah, sometimes now that it's like grown to a bigger scale, there are some things that are less fun. Like yesterday, I just finished all of our taxes for the Band and Candy Corps.
Right.
That sucked. I fucking hate tax season.
Right.
um, but yeah, but it's been definitely like a crazy adventure of ups and downs. And I think that if I learned anything from it, it's like if you believe in yourself enough to like I'm so happy that I did it because like maybe I would have, you know, I wouldn't be where we are with the band. I wouldn't have had these experiences that I've had being able to travel that way. And then growing the shop, I wouldn't have like the fulfillment of working for myself and like going after the things that I'm dreaming. And
Yeah.
like sometimes it fucking sucks. Sometimes I feel like I'm failing or I don't know what I'm doing, or I wish that there was somebody that I could like reach out to that had the answers. Um, but overall, it's just like it feels truly like something that I'm lucky to do and something that I was meant to do.
Yeah, a lot of those feelings I think are normal, especially for a lot of entrepreneurial people. And I
Yeah.
feel like it's almost heightened, especially I think you and I are roughly the same age. I just turned 30. I'm not trying to put
Yeah.
your age on blast or anything, but
No.
it's especially when it's our generation where like, my dad was always like just a dude that works for the man. He's never like done anything for himself, which is totally fine. Like I don't think
Yeah.
there's something wrong, or good or bad. There's definitely pros and cons, but I think that there's something, at least in me, I don't know, it sounds like the same in you, where it's like I just like there's something missing, even if I have the perfect job, where it's like I like what I do and I have good benefits and it pays well, but
Right.
it's like if it's not the thing that I would like literally like die on a hill for, like something's
Why do
off.
it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned like the Patreon side of things, and I've been doing scoped pretty DIY since like for the last 5.5 years. And I think that there was like
Yeah.
an element of like, I need to earn like the ability to do the Patreon because I hated seeing people launch a podcast with a Patreon, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's like, bro, you haven't even gone around the block, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but again, it's like I felt like I wanted to do that. And I didn't really I'm gonna just very quick ramble, if that's okay, Maddie. But
No, yeah, please do.
um, I didn't talk about this in the Patreon launch video, but like for me personally, I had a job that I was let go of like last summer, and even before that, there was like I was just constantly like, how much time can I give to this thing? And ever since like the
Yeah.
last career job that I had, it was like it's just hard to find a job these days, especially with like the current market and all that.
Yeah.
And like I had friends who were like, just start the Patreon. Like it's time. And I think I was just
Yeah.
hesitating because it's like, the stress and the anxiety of like, oh, I'm really putting myself out there, being like, I do this creative thing, either buy my product or buy my service or buy into the idea of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy that like I've gotten over this hurdle now, where it's like now I'm on the other side and now things are starting to go where I know in a year's time it could really go. But like, sometimes you need to like take the leap without really knowing, like knowing that there's a safety net below you, because
Yeah.
maybe 2 weeks later you're getting a call from Knock Loose being like, let's go on tour, or I'm getting a
Yeah.
call being like, hey, like we want to have live podcasting at this fest, like you should come through, or whatever it is. So
Right.
yeah, it's
And
yeah, you go.
isn't it funny, like, sometimes, like, you had your friends, like, "Just do it." Like, sometimes you're so critical of yourself and, like, what you think that you deserve for the work that you're putting out. You're like, "I do this because I love this." But
Hmm.
it's like, you do this because you love it and people love it back.
Hmm.
So, like, why not give them an avenue to support what you're doing to get like you said, to do shit at fest, to do more podcasts, to do it more full time. Like, why hold yourself back from that? It's because you're like, do I deserve it? Have I worked hard enough for it? And it's like sometimes you just need a friend to be like Brandon was like, just fucking go for it.
Hmm.
Because ultimately, and this was another piece of advice that I actually thought was funny. Brandon's boss told me when I told him that I put in my 2 weeks. Oh, because Brandon used to work at parks too, but he was out like in the actual park and not in the office.
Gotcha.
Um,
So both of
but
you
his
like were borderline Parks and Recreation, but in real
yeah,
life.
dude, but nobody at parks watched the show. I would make
What?
jokes. No, nobody watched it. One time
That's
I had
criminal.
it was fucked. And then they were like, why would I watch that? I live it. I was like, none of you are funny. None of you are funny. This is like if you were funny, but it's like relevant to our job.
Right.
And they were just like, nah. Like I had a Ron Swanson bobblehead that someone got me on my desk. And one of my coworkers was like, is that your dad? And I was like, what? Like I was like, first of all, where would I get a high quality crafted bobblehead of my dad? Like where does one
Right.
first of all? And second, I was like, no, like, do you not know the show?
Right.
But sorry, circling back, his boss was like, I'm really proud of you. I think you can do anything you want to do.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, really? You're the first person that's not like, you're an idiot, don't quit, that like I've told. And he was like, what's the worst that could happen? You quit the job, you go and you try to work for yourself, you follow your dream and you fail. You either find another job or you fix whatever you failed and you keep going. He was like, I don't know why people think that you fail once and then that's it.
Hmm.
And that was so important to me because there are times, I mean, like I'm sure it happened with you in the podcast where you feel like this episode didn't perform as well, or, what am I doing that's not as interesting on this one that was more interesting on this one. It's
Right.
like trying to figure out these things, and it's like you just have to like go with it and learn from the journey,
Right.
which is so fucking hard when you're like in it and you're like, did I lose it?
Yeah.
Am I even good at this anymore? Do
Right.
people even care? And
Well,
then it comes
also
back
as
around.
you grow up, it's like your time and your resources become that much more valuable. So it's like almost harder
Right.
to be like, oh man, like I spent 2 hours on this podcast and I thought it was gonna like explode and then it didn't
Yeah.
or whatever. But I totally agree that it's like I think it's about stepping up to the plate and
Yeah.
being like, if I've done 250 podcasts and let's say 160 of them like hit and then the rest are duds or maybe they're just for friends and I don't expect anything from them.
Yeah.
Like whatever the ratios are, like still being in the plus versus like you do one thing and then it's negative and you're like, oh bro, I can't, bring myself to do that anymore. It's like, no,
Yeah.
like just step up more and make that, the ratio in the plus. And if anything, like I'm sure you can agree that like creative stuff like needs like probably learned more of Candy Corp stuff the more you've done it versus like let me just go away into my office and just research for 3 weeks and then
Yeah.
do the thing.
Yeah. And sometimes you learn more from the failures than you do from the successes. Cause sometimes when things succeed, you're like, I can't really pinpoint why this went off so well. But when it fails, you're like, I know not what to do next time.
Yes, a thousand
So
percent.
I think both are valuable. And it's like, I think also just focusing, like you were saying, sometimes it's like 100 go well, but one went bad. And isn't that like the same fucking thing with like music reviews where it's like you could get 100 positive things and one person is like, this is ass. And you're just like, it's like you fixate on the negative and you have to remind yourself, like, what's the point of even giving that my time
Right.
when you could be putting time into like improving and like planning new things
Hmm.
and just like pushing it forward.
Yeah. Someone said to me once, or I heard on a podcast that was like, I think the reason that people get so mixed up with those negative reviews or that like off base comment or criticism is because they get too high on the actual praise, the fire emojis, you're the goat, like all that kind of shit. So I've really tried to discipline myself when it's like, you know, people who are supporting me on Patreon to like the other side where people are like talking shit or about whatever. I'm like, I'm just on I'm in my own lane. I'm focusing
Yeah.
on what I'm doing. I know my intent and I know all of like the lessons that I've learned through the pros and cons. And I'm just gonna keep going and kind of like put my fingers in my ears to a degree. Um,
Yeah.
I do believe that there, and this goes into music as well, like having trusted opinions on what you're doing, to give feedback. Like I think that's important. But
For
when it's
sure.
the masses, like just, you know, tunnel vision, like, put the blinders
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, you do kind of have to do that because it's like you can't let obviously positive feedback feels amazing and it's like it's great to feel supported, but you can't let that change like the mission and goal of what you have.
Totally.
And it's
Yeah.
like if your goal is for people to enjoy it, it's like mission accomplished, but then it's like your goal is also what's the next podcast you're recording? And you can't let somebody being like scoped as whack, like be like, well, now I can't record the next podcast.
I
You know what
know.
I mean?
Yeah.
And
There's no way
I
in
al-
heck that would like take the wind out of my sails.
right, right. And I think a lot of times like it's obviously harder when it's something personal to yourself, but anytime like any of my friends have come to me, like because I've had like friends that are other musicians that like people are just brutal to them online. And I'm just like, nobody that's like happy and well adjusted and focused on a project that means something to them is going online and trashing something else.
Hmm.
Like when have you ever seen like a successful musician or a successful artist like punching down? You don't.
Right.
It's always really unhappy anonymous people and it's like maybe for them that's them venting it out and like letting it go. But like you can't even like let that affect you because it's not somebody that you like look up to that's really like killing it. It's somebody that's miserable
Yeah. It's
that
like
might
hardcore kid 5527
yeah,
XXX is
yeah.
commenting about this versus like someone
I could
in
do
an
a podcast. I
yeah.
could do a podcast better than this. I'm always like, and that I used to get that when I first started Candy Corpse, like anybody could do this. I was like, then fucking do it.
Hmm.
Like, if anybody can do it, then fucking do it.
Hmm.
Like, and then when you can't, shut the fuck up.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
that's that's the long and short of it.
The punching down analogy is perfect, and um it's also just comedic when a band who does have any level of success, like and usually I see it in another genre who is
Yeah.
talking shit about it, and that just is like you're just playing yourself at the end of the day. Like
Yeah.
it was, Michael Jackson eating the popcorn gif when it was like Trapped was just going after any like person who was talking shit about their band. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
bro, you had a good single, but like your band actually is trash.
But also I feel
But
like
yeah,
that just it speaks so much to the unhappiness of a person, especially like
absolutely. Yes.
going after like they're like, I'm so much more famous than you. It's like, then why the fuck do you care what I have to say?
Right. Yeah.
Like if you're killing it and you're like happy in your career and you're successful, like why the fuck do you care what some random person has to say?
Yeah.
And like obviously, like I said, obviously it's still hard to like receive negative shit personally. Like it's very easy to be like, fuck that. And then it's a different thing once it comes. But like when I see things like that specific one, I was just like, bro, you're embarrassing yourself. Like
I know.
this looks so cringy.
Yeah, it is wild, but like I think it really is something to be said about people that, like kind of like they step into the arena and the arena is life. And the battle is I'm trying to make the shit that puts me on fire, whether whatever creative thing it is, music, podcasting, making cool like art and merchandise, to go, because most people in life will not even like they'll be sitting on the sidelines and they'll be the ones
Yeah.
critiquing and throwing the stones and throwing the insults. But there are a few people who can actually like do that and like be the gladiator to be like, are you not entertained, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
Yeah. So Maddie, we're at a point of the episode where, and again, this is all new shit, so I'm very excited. But we're gonna continue our conversation on our first ever Scoped Exposure podcast after show. So we're gonna
Yeah.
still talk a little bit more about Candy Corpse, and probably talk about some of your knife questions. I have a couple Patreon questions, but before we end the main episode, we always end with a favorite Mosh related story that you would like
Ooh.
to list us with. So, and that's anything off the top of your head, wholesome, gruesome, you're the knife related or not.
Oh man. When you said gruesome, the first thing that I thought of was this guy head walking during Unearth at This Is Hardcore, and he just snapped his leg like a fucking toothpick. That was
God.
horrifying. Um, when I think of wholesome, I think there was one time we were out on tour with, like, I think it was Jesus Piece, Jukai, and Sanction, and Lumpy was moshing towards me. And if you've ever seen Lumpy mosh, you can understand why I literally screamed at the top of my lungs. And then he like laughed and like like patted my back because he like saw me at the last second because I was just like, no, like, I don't want to die. No, other funny moshing shit. I'm trying to think. I feel like moshing is like so sick and so hilarious at the same time. Like I love it and I love watching people mosh. Um, other funny mosh stories. What's one for you? While I
Oh,
still
you're
think
gonna
of one.
throw it back at me?
I'm throwing it back.
Okay. A really recent one is my other band. We played our first show, and Suration, who's a bigger Calgary band from here, was headlining, and my vocalist Zach. I'm wearing them right now. But my sister-in-law got me these orange Crocs for my birthday,
Yes,
and
orange.
and
More
so I played
orange.
our set in them, and everyone's like, "Dude, it's crazy that you wore those Crocs." So when Saration played, I was filming the set but I pulled one Croc off, handed it to Zach, and then he just like crowd killed with the Croc for a little bit, which was hilarious. And then he like instead of walking back and handing it back to me, he just like yeeted it at me. So the Croc crowd kill was kind of the joke
That's good.
of that. So that's my story.
I thought of one more.
Okay.
It was years ago, in Kennett Square, which is like actually I grew up in Delaware, but then I lived with my grandparents for a while when I was younger,
Hmm.
in Kennett Square, which is just outside of Delaware. And I found out there was a show there. It was a house show, and I found out Agitator was playing like years and years ago. I was super excited, went, and then one of the guys there had Hulk hands that was moshing, and then it was in somebody's basement. So there was like a bunch of their like random parents' shit in the basement,
Sure.
and he picked up a printer and just started like smashing it over people. And the kid's house that it was like, my mom's gonna be so mad. And I just remember like Marty, it was like long hair Marty, leather vest, no shirt underneath, and this kid just like smashing people with a printer. And I was just
That's
like,
so funny.
this is tight.
Yeah.
This is cool.
Hey, why couldn't you fax that over to us the other day? Well, I got a
My
story for
son
you.
my son's a fucking idiot, and he let his friends come do a show in our basement,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Well, Maddie, I know this is the end of the main episode. We're gonna still chat a little bit in the after show, but I'm really happy for all the time that you've given. For the main episode, anything you want to plug or shout out or send the people off with before we wrap up? For all the normies who are not on the Patreon side.
Yeah, listen to our new EP. We talked about it. It's Dust to Dust. It is up on our site if you go to yearoftheknife.com. We're gonna be on tour this weekend? Yeah, this weekend we're gonna be out with Gates to Hell and our death metal band Damnation's Domain. And then
You're
at the
gonna
end of the month,
be double duty, it sounds like.
double duty.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Mhm.
love it. I love playing twice. It's fun.
Yeah.
And then yeah, check out Damnation's Domain if you're into death metal. Brandon sings for it. It's literally everyone from Year of the Knife plus a couple of our friends from Delaware, Damien and Rich. And then at the end of the month, we're doing a tour with Sangwasugabog to support their new record. Check out their new record. It's fucking sick. That tour is with Internal Bleeding, Vomit Forth, and us. I'm trying to think. Yeah, we're touring Europe in April with Unearth and Misery Index. It's fucking sick. Gonna punish the guy from Misery Index about dying fetus. And
Damn.
then yeah, keep an eye out. We got more shit coming, and check out other Delaware bands, Simulacra and Foreign Hands.
Hmm. Yeah, shout out to Foreign Hands. I've been told, and I this is the thing that I'm just committing myself to. Lumpy has encouraged me to get the singer of Simulacra on the podcast for a long ass
Yeah,
time.
you
So,
should.
yeah, like that's gonna be the first thing I do after we're off the call here. But yeah, all of the Year of the Knife and Damnation music links will be in the description, as well as the Candy Corpse and Maddie's personal. Thank you again. We're gonna keep chatting, but
Yeah.
thank you again for joining us. This has been really fun. I'm stoked to keep going.
Yeah, me too. Fuck yeah, this has been a blast. Thank you for having me.